Hi, this is Mike Bale with Banger Inc. In today's session, we're going to talk about running job cost in Sage Intacct and comparing that to running it in Sage 300 CRE, which is formerly known as Timberline. What we're going to do is we're not going to talk about some of the major differences in the two products. Those can be found in other sessions. In this session, we're going to focus on specifically some of the functionality in how you set up a project, how you put a budget in the system, enter a schedule value for a contract, and compare some reports. Some of the major differences like cloud native, Sage Intacct being a cloud native software versus local server. Those will be obvious as we go through the two, but in this session, you'll notice I have a split screen open, and on the left side, I have the Sage 300 CRE product open, and on the right side, we have the Sage Intacct that I'm logged into from a web page. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll jump back and forth and try and compare and contrast a little bit and just kind of show you some of the features and functionalities in each. One of the first areas is we'll talk a little bit about job cost and the areas you need to go into in each of the products. For the 300 CRE, going in and setting up job costs and start getting your projects ready in the system, you're going to be in a couple areas. You're going to be in the job cost module. You're going to be in possibly the project management module if you own that. And you're also going to be in the contracts module. And in comparison over in Intacct, under applications, really everything you're going to need to be in to get this project ready to go is inside the projects area or application. You kind of see in here, we have the ability under setup to put in project estimates, set up the projects, set up all the change controls, and over here to actually put in the project contract. So it's all in one central location, whereas over in 300, you're going to be jumping around different modules. You need to make sure you have enough concurrent uses in those modules and so forth. So what we'll do first is let's jump in and go into job cost and actually set up a project. So to do that, I would need to open up the job cost module. Depending on your concurrent uses, you may get locked out there because you only have one use, concurrent use. So as soon as you open up that module in job cost, it takes up a license in the system. So for example, if I go in again and try and open up a second job cost, I should get an error message. It might come up on a different screen. Oh, there it is. It says, hey, you only have one concurrent use, you can't get in. So if somebody else is in there, that could be an issue. With Intacct, it's strictly based on security and how many concurrent users you have in the system. It doesn't matter what you're doing in there. Well, it does to the effect of what user type license you have, but assuming you have full accounting license like you would in both systems, you're only limited to the named user. So if I have access into Intacct, I can open up as many screens as I want here. We'll take a look at that. So let's go back over to the left side and take a look at the job cost screen. And if I want to go in and set up a project, I would go to my menu, set up jobs. If I want to see a list of my existing projects, I can do that inside the screen, but I can't get a visual list while setting up a project unless I come into like an inquiry here. And for example, if I want to take a look at a job list, and then I can see my existing jobs, okay? But what I can't do is I can't add on the fly here. So in Intacct, you'll notice if I come over to projects here, and I go into the projects, and you can get to the project area from the All tab or the Setup tab. They're both there. You have two options here. You have a plus button, where you can just go right in and add a new project, which is really equal to the Setup Jobs button over here on the left. And you also can click projects here, which will take you into this list, which looks a little bit similar to here. But the difference here is I can actually go into the project setup from here. In this screen, I cannot. It's just view only. So you'll notice here in your project screen, I can come in and open up an existing one by clicking edit or view, or I can click the add button from here and create a brand new project or import it if I want to import that project. So you have a lot more options here in Sage Intacct as to how you want to navigate and get into your projects and how you want to set up a new one. Whereas in 300, you're pretty much going into setup jobs. So we'll open that up in the system. And one of the things, this job setup screen in Sage 300 is actually one of the newer screens in the system. Now, newer meaning maybe 10, 15 years older built, but it does take a little bit to open up. So you'll notice it just came up now. So if I do want to see a list of existing jobs, and if I want to get into one and edit a project, I can click this list over here. And again, I'm in 300, and I can click on the project I want to bring up. If I want to just best fit here without using a list, I can't do that in 300. So if I type in the job name COR, nothing comes up. If I type in 03 for the project number, nothing comes up. I have to get to this list in Sage 300, and that's consistent everywhere in the system, vendors, things like that. Once I'm in this list, in some cases, I can start typing in the job name. In this instance, it will find the project for me, or I could type in 03-003 and it'll find the project as well. Okay, so in that scenario, let's assume that we want to set up a new project. So I'm going to set up my next project number. So there's no auto fill for the next project number in Sage 300. I have to go look at my list and see what my next project number is. So in this scenario, you'll notice I have 03018. So now I know that my next project is 03019. When I hit tab or enter, it'll say, hey, it doesn't exist. Do I want to add it? I can say yes. And then I'll give it a name, and we'll call it, let's call it John's Department Store. Okay. And then from there, when I set up the project, you'll notice you have, some fields to fill in: address, type, project manager, different named fields here. One of the things you'll notice that's absent from these fields is drop-down list. So these fields can be used in reporting in Sage 300, but the issue that a lot of people run into here is because they're a text field, you can mistype it, you can cap it, you can space it differently, and that makes your reporting a little bit harder because when you're filtering or sorting on this information, it's inconsistent and you might not get all the data. So you have to really make sure that you're careful with that. So let's call this type retail. Okay, so for example, if I spelled it wrong or if I put a space in and called something else, I could have an issue there. Okay, so if we go over to, and we'll kind of do this at the same time when we can, if we go over to Sage Intacct, we go to projects and we click on the plus button, we can set up a new project. Before we do that, you'll also notice see these little stars here? And every menu item here in Intacct has these stars, and what they are is their favorites. So not only can you get to it right from the project screen, but if you're in here a lot, I can add that to the star. And now to get to my projects setup screen, I can just hit this star on the left side, and you'll notice it's one of my favorites. So I can get to it right from there. So it makes it really handy to make it specific to what the user does. In Sage 300, you have to go back to your desktop and build some favorites in here. And the issue with the favorites is that only opens up the one window, the setup project window. And if you need to jump around and go to different areas, you basically have to come back to your desktop. So I usually recommend in 300 that people stay right in the module from there. So let's do that. Let's go into the plus button here. Let's set up a new project just like we're doing on the left side. And you'll notice here, I have auto numbering turned on. This is an optional feature in Sage Intacct, but if I just want to keep a consecutive number, maybe I reset it every year because I want to put the actual 2-digit year as a prefix. I can do that. I can reset that number at the beginning of the year. I can have it autofill, so I don't even need to know what the next number is right now. I just want to give it a name. So we'll type in John's Department Store and go from there. So one of the difference in this screen is you'll notice now we have different fields just like we have over here in 300, but they're all drop-down lists and they're all customizable. So you could define your own project types, for example, and you could select them off the list. So you'll notice here retail isn't an option. So I can either click add, or I could type in retail, and when I hit tab on my keyboard, it says, hey, this isn't part of the list. Do you want to add it? Now, that's only if you have security to do so. You may want to lock that down a little bit and, you know, have a standard list that everybody agrees upon. But in this scenario, yep, I want to be able to add it. It opens up a second screen, and I can come into here and type in retail, and I could link it to a different parent type. So for example, it's retail, but it's still considered commercial. So I could actually make commercial my parent, and now I can report on all my commercial jobs, but I can also report on just retail within commercial. So you can really get specific and granular in Intacct as far as how you want to report on these projects. Okay, so let's do that. We'll click save, and now that's going to code it as retail. So that's the big difference here. One of the big differences here is these drop-down lists. You'll see them everywhere, and they're not just on the project, they're everywhere in your setup, in your system, vendors, customers, employees. But all of these statuses, you know, you can grab off a drop-down list. So getting back to Sage 300 over on the left side, same thing for project manager. You'll notice that's a name. We'll call it Kevin Smith. And again, it's static. It's a text field. I can type it in wrong. You know, I can be inconsistent. Over in Intacct, you're actually going to have a contact record. So down over here under people, you'll see I have a project manager. And if I click list, this is going to show me, you know, all of my employees or resources in the system. So I could come into here and say, Greg Lovett is the project manager for this project. Now, one of the really nice things here with Intacct is you don't have to use the list. In 300, you have to use the list. But if I know he's Greg, GR, I can just start typing it in. And that's what most people use is this best fit. You can type in the name or ID in most cases. So I can really quickly see Gregory Lovett is going to be my project. Excuse me, I went in the wrong area. That's the primary contact. The project manager, so this would be from the customer side. The project manager is going to be over in under people here. I had that shrunken up. I was showing somebody how you can shrink up the sections. So this is going to be project manager, Greg Lovett. Okay, but you can also list contact names for your project from the owner's perspective, from your customer's perspective, and we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so there's my project manager. So going back on the left side, as I go through the status, you know, different tabs in the Sage 300 system, you know, I can track statuses, I can put in some dates, checklists. When I get to the billing info tab, one of the areas here is the customer. So again, best fit. If I type in GRO, it doesn't pre-fill or find anything. So in order to select a customer, I have to click the list, and then I can type in GRO, and it'll find the Grocers Association, and I can pull that in, okay? So over in Intacct, I could just type in GRO right from the main screen, and now there's my customer, okay? Okay. So if I go back to the AR customer, let's say it's a new customer that I need to set up. If I type in John, let's give it John D as my ID. If I hit tab or enter here, you'll notice I get a red X. Okay, I can't set up the customer on the fly. Some cases you can in Sage 300, but in this scenario, I can't. So what I would have to do in that scenario is I would have to jump over to accounts receivable, open accounts receivable up, go and set up the customer, then come back into the job and grab it from the list. Now I can do that and I can stay in my job setup, but now I'm taking up a use of job cost and accounts receivable until I get out of it. So in this scenario, I would do that. Over in Intacct, when you come into the customer record, just like we did on the project type, if I type in, we'll call it John's department, when I hit tab or enter, it says, hey, this customer isn't on the list. Do you want to add it? Again, security, depending on if you're allowed to or not. And now I can set up the customer name, which maybe is John's Inc. or something like that. I could fill all that information. How do I want to print it? All of that accounts receivable information, all while still in here. Click save. And now it's going to add it to my customer list and put it on the customer record. Okay, so it's just a lot more efficient to get going in this scenario. So let's just say over on the left, I'm going to put in the Grocers Association for my customer for Sage 300. We'll do the same thing here to keep it consistent. Let's grab Grocers Association on Intacct here. And in the 300 side, you're going to decide if this is a quick bill job or a contract job for billing purposes. Basically, you're going to use contracts in Sage 300 if you want to do a progress billing, like a schedule value with an AIA type G703 look, or if you want to do a time and material invoice. And then over in Intacct, you really don't have to decide that at this point. You can decide that when you set up the contract in the next step, but there are some additional fields that you can turn on here under the billing tab where you can put in terms and you can select a billing type, which in this scenario is going to be fixed fee or time and material. This is going to be a fixed fee. Okay, so you can do some of that reporting here ahead of time, but really when we go in Intacct, when we set up the contract under project contracts is where we're going to dictate all of that. We're not going to get too much into payroll here, but on the left side for the Sage 300, this is where you can do some payroll setup. You can set up if it's a certified job, what work state is it, workers' comp group, things like that are done directly in the initial project setup. In Intacct, if you have the construction payroll, you're actually going to do that portion of it in the payroll job setup. What's nice about that is that functionality is separated because you may have a project manager or someone who needs to set up the project from that perspective, but we don't necessarily want them getting into the payroll areas of the system. In 300, if they can go in and set up a job, here on the left, they can get into this tab, okay? So it's kind of nice because you have the project manager world over here, get it ready for commitments and estimates and all that. And then the payroll crew can actually go in and start getting the project ready to do payroll in the system. So that's where you'll see that a little different. Then over in Sage 300, you have the AP and GL tab. And this is where you're going to do some of your coding for the general ledger in 300. So you'll notice here 300 handles that through a tiered general ledger structure. So you have to define a ledger and you have to define if you want to track things like separate companies, entities, divisions, locations, that type of stuff has to be built in your general ledger structure when you first set the system up. So in this sample data, they built a 2-digit dash, I think it's 4 digits for the basic count. So you have to build that in your general ledger structure. It makes your chart of account list very big. And it also kind of limits you to what type of reporting you can get out. You can only get the reporting out based on your structure that you set up. So let's just say in this company, it's going to be for company 10, Timberline Construction. So you need to define that. Over in Intacct, okay, we're going to do this a couple ways. Number one, we can set the project up at what's called top level, which means every entity can see this project. Or if we have multiple companies, we can set it up at the company or entity level, which I did, Timberline General Construction. And that's only going to be available and viewable in this entity, and then anybody who has top level security as well. But what's nice is it already selects what entity it's going to be linked to when you set up the project. And then in additional information, Intacct has what's called dimensions. And it's a very, very powerful tool that allows you to generate financial reporting in all shapes and sizes and sorts and filters that you need. You can get P&Ls by project. You can get P&Ls by project type, by locations, by departments, how we do in profitability by department, by project manager. So what are dimensions in the system in Intacct? Dimensions are a project, an employee, a vendor, a customer. You can see profitability or see all your jobs by customer and get reporting by that. And it's all based on these dimensions, and you do not have to build that structure in your general ledger chart of accounts. You're going to use your chart of accounts in conjunction with these dimensions. So for example, for this project, and again, this is your list. This is your department list, whatever you choose to call it. And you can have parent-child relationships here as well. So we're going to call this construction department. And we're going to give it a location. So you'll notice here that we're in Timberline General Construction, but we've also set up what's called locations because we do work in different areas and we want to see reporting and profitability and things like that by location, by area. So we can say, which location is this project for? This is the Houston location, the San Antonio, the Kansas City location. All of these 4 locations here are tied to Timberline General Construction, and they're kind of labeled accordingly here. I mean, you can have multiple entities and multiple companies, but this is a powerful feature. So now I can see how am I doing in this area versus Kansas City versus Houston for all my projects. So we're going to say this is a Kansas City project and track that as well. Okay. So this coding is a big part of the process in the system. You also have some additional information in Intacct as far as how you want to track billing rates and cost rates and resources and invoice options in the system. Okay. So as far as 300, you don't really have, besides this GL prefix and the types that we talked about initially and creating reports to run off these types, that's really all you have as far as that goes. So I'm going to click save here. We do want to get moving on here. So let's save that project. And I'll close that screen, get back to the job cost menu. The only other additional thing which is really powerful here in the Sage Intacct project setup is you have a new tab here called Purchase Commitments. So we don't have any yet in the system, but as we get a little further along, you're able to see right in the project setup screen all of these subcontract and purchase orders that you have for this project. It makes it very convenient. Somebody's in, a project manager's in, looking around on their project, they can see this right from here. They don't have to go to a separate area. They certainly can under purchasing. We have purchase orders and subcontracts, but they can do it right from the screen. In 300, you can't do that. You'd have to do it from an inquiry, or you'd have to go into task commitments. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. So let's save that project as well. And we can go look at existing one here. So let's take a look at an existing one. And if I pull up an existing one now, let's see, I think there is some purchase orders in this one. Yep, there's 3 here, so I can get to it right from here. And I can drill down and get directly into the subcontract from here. So it just allows you a lot more navigation options in the system. So you don't have to get out and go to a different area every time you want to do something. And last but not least, I want to talk about in the setup itself is you'll notice in Intacct, you have these asterisks, and they tell you what fields are required. So you'll notice here, if I was to leave these fields out, I would have gotten an error message and it wouldn't let me save. Now 300 has that same feature there is certain required fields that it is going to give you an error on if you don't fill out in the job cost. Number one, it visually doesn't really tell you which fields are those required fields. You don't see an asterisk in it. You kind of have to just click save and see what happens. And in addition, what's really powerful, a powerful tool in the Intacct system, is the ability to set up what's called smart rules. Okay. So smart rules are in what's called platform services, and you need to be at the top level to do that. So what's nice about Intacct as well is I don't have to jump back over to the desktop. And what I can do is I don't have to get out of the project information screen. Maybe I want this open so I can compare it to something else. I have multiple screens. I can right mouse click on the tabs up here and I can click duplicate. And again, because of the licensing, you can have as many of these tabs open as you want. So over here, I'm still in the project information, but in this tab, I want to go back up to my setup, which is in my top level. And it'll flip over to the top level. And you'll notice you have something called platform services here. And in here, you have these smart rules and smart events. And these become really useful when you're live and using the system to check on fields and make sure things are being done right, but also during setup and during entry. So now I can build a process and put it in place. So I can dictate what fields I want to make sure are set up when somebody sets up a project, when somebody sets up a vendor. So I can make any of these fields have a smart rule on them. You can make sure that the project type is always filled out. You can make sure that there is dimensions always filled in. We always want a department and location or we're going to get an error. So you can really kind of foolproof it in a way where somebody can just go through, set up the system and hit save, and then they're going to get error messages or warnings saying, hey, make sure you fill this out type of thing. And that's consistent throughout the system. You can't really do that in 300 besides the already built-in required fields. So I just wanted to talk about that before we moved on. So let's go back to the home screens here in both systems. And I'm still going to work from the Timberline General Construction. One of the next areas we'll talk about is getting in the job estimate or job budget in both systems. And we'll start over in the 300 module. So you can actually enter in the budget manually under task, enter estimates. You can also import the estimate. There's a couple things to consider when importing estimates in the Sage 300 world is number one, when you import that estimate or that budget, it writes transactions to the job cost, new and current transactional records, depending on if it's been posted or not. And one of the issues is once it's imported, you can't just kind of undo it or hit the delete button. You would have to either, if it's not posted yet, you would actually have to remove the new file. But you want to be careful with that because the new file could have other information in there like accounting data and stuff like that that just hasn't been posted yet. So typically what happens is if an estimate is imported in 300 and it's not correct and it's already been posted, what the user will do is make adjustments to correct it. So you can't just delete it. They'll do a minus or a plus to fix each line. So there's some caution there to make sure that it's imported correctly. Over in Intacct, if I go into projects and I can either do it from inside the project or I can go over to set up project estimates. What you can do here is that stores it as a separate entry. And if you import the budget and for some reason it didn't come in right or it just, it needs to be recoded or whatnot, I can hit delete here. Okay. And that's going to actually remove, the budget from the system. It's not going to affect anything general ledger wise, transaction wise, and I can re-import it, or I could choose to go into this budget and edit it from there as well. So you have a lot more flexibility. The other difference is the import file itself. In 300, when I go to import the estimate, if I hit the help button here, let's see if we can get this to come up. And I go and type in import estimate. Let's take a look at the estimate file. Now notice my mouse isn't cooperating that well here. Oops. It was a little clunky as far as that goes. But basically the file is a 3-part file. I must have closed job cost on accident. Let me open up job cost again. It's a 3-part file. You need a header record, you need a cost code record, you need a category record, and it gets a little harder to build that import template the first time. Once you get it built, then it's a matter of, importing it in correctly. Over in Sage Intacct, you can import in your estimate, your budget, and it's a very, very easy template that's already pre-built. And there's a lot of API options as far as getting that budget in directly. I had a template. Let me see if I can pull one up here for you. Here's what a template looks like in Excel. We usually provide some samples as to what needs to go in what columns, but this is a very straightforward flat file template once it opens up in Excel that you could get a budget into. And it's just waiting to open up my Excel. There it is. So you can see here that, we have some samples that we usually provide, but here's what needs to be for the estimate, the job number, the different cost codes, the different categories, and that can just get imported in an Excel type file. So what we'll show now is how to kind of put one in manually and see the differences between the two as we go from there. So let's close this up and let's get back into Sage 300. Okay, so if I enter a budget, we'll go into task, enter estimate here in Sage 300, and it's a spreadsheet type oriented grid. One of the things, the difference is in, you'll see there's no maximize here. It's just an older software. So you have to kind of put up with that. Even if I try and make this bigger, it's not going to happen. You'll see in Intacct where, it's going to take advantage of that newer technology. But let's say if I want to grab my project, I can type in the number or I can go find it on my list. There's my new project, John's Department Store. And what I can do here now is I can click my list of my cost codes. I can't pre-fill it here. I can't type in 01. It's going to pre-fill in. I have to click this list. And once I click this list, the first line is there's no job-specific cost code list yet in the system. Now, if you import it in either system, if you import it, it's gonna build that cost code list for the project ahead of time. But in this scenario, I'm pulling from my standard list altogether. So I would have to come into here and I can't sort it by name. I can best fit by number. So I would have to kind of, scroll around and find it. Say, we're going to do some excavating. And same thing for categories. I can either get it right. I'm not sure if it's M or what, but I can just click my list and it is. We'll say material. Actually, we'll say labor on this line. And in this case, I am going to put in units. It's going to take 60 hours of labor at $100 an hour. And it'll pre-fill with today's dates. You want to be careful with that, especially if you're doing some cutoff date reports for budgeting. Let's say this project started 4/1/23. It's original estimate. And I'm just tabbing through here. One of the nice things about 300 when you're entering data, it will pre-fill down from the last line, which is nice. You can see that here. Same job, maybe the same cost code. So I'm going to keep hitting tab through the system here. And now maybe there is some equipment that I'm using as well. And it's going to take us 30 hours of equipment time. And that equipment costs $125 an hour to run. And so you can do that. And then maybe there's another cost code. Now, if I click my list again, notice it only shows me one cost code because it's building that cost code list for the project as I go, which is nice. But when I'm first putting an estimate in, it gets a little annoying because I want to add another cost code. I have to switch my view to my standard cost code list. And then I have to pick another list off the menu. So let's say we're going to do some concrete. So let's come down here and let's go to just some, we'll just grab some concrete here. I thought we had one right here. We'll just do some, whatever. We'll just do some specialty concrete. Okay. And this one we're going to sub out. So we're going to click my list. Now notice again, it only shows me the categories I've used for this cost code or this project before, but I need to grab my standard category list and grab subcontracts. So there's a lot of clicking involved in that. And I want to add it to my project, and that's what it's asking me there. Okay. So in this case, we don't have units turned on for subs. We got a quote from the sub. It's going to be $56,000 to do concrete and so forth. Okay. So I can, once I'm done, I'll click Save Line, and I can check totals if I want. And I can click Finish. So when I click Finish, depending on how the system is set up in Sage 300, you may have to post the estimate. If it's set up on manual, you have to post it. If it's set up on automatic, it's going to post once I'm done here. So, you may go and run a report now and realize, well, I just put my budget in. Where the heck is it? Why isn't it showing up in the system? So that's all depending on your setup in 300. If we go into settings real quick, there's post and interface. And you can see here, we are on automatic. So as soon as I hit finish, it did update the budget to the project. But if we were on manual, it wouldn't have, and you may not have gotten your numbers up to date. So sometimes it's a guessing game in 300, but be aware of it there. Over in Sage Intacct now, you could do a couple things here. Now, we talked about the importing, but to create a new budget, you can just click the add button here. I can also, like you saw before with the project, click the plus button and it'll bring in a new budget. I can also say, you know what? This project, Amazon Warehouse, Kansas City, is using the same cost codes and budget line items that I'm using for this project. You could actually go in and open up this budget from the other project, and you can duplicate it. And you could add it to the new project and then go make your changes. So that's a nice little feature that you can do. We're not going to do that. We'll just do it from scratch. So we'll go in and click add. And you can give a budget description, and we'll call it, so there's a little more header information that you can use for reporting. And the reason being is we can have multiple budgets in Sage Intacct. In 300, you get one estimate in the system. In Intacct, you can have multiple budgets. You check off which one's going to be your primary budget, but you can see here for estimate types, you can set up as many different estimate types as you like. You can have forecasting, original, revised estimates. So maybe you have your bid estimate versus your buyout estimate, and you can report on all of those in comparison to your actuals and your committed. So you can have as many of these budget types as you want in the system. So that's why you have this header information. And here's where we're saying, which project is this for? And there's the John's department store. And it looks like provide a valid start date. Oh, and I didn't add a start date for the project. So I think I skipped over that during my initial setup. And there's one of your little smart warnings, smart rules that you could have in the system. So right from the screen, I can go back into the project and I can click view here, and it'll take me into the project setup that we were earlier. You'll notice I don't have a begin date here. So I can click edit and I can go put that in. And we'll just say we're going to start it April 1st, save. And now I can tab through. Okay. So let's say it's the current estimate, and the estimate date we get to decide right here. It doesn't pre-fill to today, and it would have pre-filled to the project start date if I had that filled in initially. We don't have to check it off as primary, only if you have another budget in there and you want to make this the primary. But the first budget you put in for a project, it's going to assume it's primary, and it'll check it afterwards. So down here, we do have an integrate with GL. And the reason it's asking this is because of how those dimensions work in the system. All the reporting is off one area in Intacct. So in 300, you have job cost transactions, you have GL transactions, you have accounts payable invoice records, you have payroll transactions, and they're all in their own areas, and they do integrate. But sometimes you cannot get enough information in one of those records, so you have to try and tables, and you have to try and merge them all. Well, with here, all of that information is going to be stored in the transactional records in GL. So I can run not only my actual cost reports out of the system, financial reports, but I can run in comparison to estimated budgets, to contract amounts, to committed amounts, to all of that information is going to end up in one place. And it really gives you a lot of reporting capabilities all in one area. So we're going to put it to what's called the primary project budget in the system. And now the other thing you can do is I like to save often. You can click save at any time. You can keep moving down in the system here. But let's keep moving on. Okay, so here's down here where I can put my budgets in manually. You have the ability to have a different workflow type here. This is going to be my original estimate. And I can best fit my project, type in excavating. It'll pull that in here. And then what cost types or categories as they're compared to in Sage 300 do I want to use? Now it looks like this cost code only has a subcontract category associated with it because my guess is typically in this data set, we subcontract that out. But what I could do is I could say, you know what, we're going to do that ourselves. We can type in labor. And it says, hey, you know what, it's not in there yet. Do you want to add it? I can add it on the fly for that project. So I can grab my project and I can say for excavating, I do want to add labor in there as well. Now, typically when we bring in your cost codes, we'll also have all the cost types associated with it, so you won't have to do that. But you can add that on the fly if you need it. So just like before, I can say, I forgot what I put before, but I think it was 100 for the cost rate. You don't need an effective date because it's going to grab it from the estimate date above. You could put a description or memo field in, and you keep going just like you did in 300. Original, I can type in excavating. And I could say this is material now. Again, same thing. Material's not present either, but we're going to add it on the fly here. So we'll do John. And notice how I can just type in John to grab it. I can just type in EX to grab it. And I can just type in M to grab it. So I don't really need to know what these codes are. I just need to key in the description. And from there, oh, I think we used equipment before, but material's fine. This is just the demo data. We'll just say it's 4,500. And then you'll notice here, because we didn't import just like before, if I click list, I don't see the concrete as part of my items, my cost code. So I can click this add button here and it opens up this screen, and now I can get to my whole list. So I can say concrete. It'll find all the items with CON in them. So there's our, I don't know if I have specialty concrete on here, but we'll just grab concrete finishing. Save that, and we can add that in there. Okay, and this one has all the cost types. So we'll say we are going to sub this one out and 45,000. Okay, so you just keep going as far as that goes in the system. And we'll click save as well. So now both systems have a budget in there. Over in Sage 300, if I needed to change that budget, so for example, let's see if we have one. Here's an estimate summary, current file, John's department store, there it is, 65,000. There's my line items. If this should have been 10,000 for excavating, for equipment, it should have been 10,000. I can't just edit that. I have to go and actually make another entry to add 250 bucks to it. Okay, or minus 250 bucks. Excuse me. In this system, I could filter, I could sort, so I can switch my sort here. So you can see there's my budget, and I can go into the entries. And I can edit those entries, not from here, sorry about that. I clicked on the wrong field, and I can go into edit. You have to go into edit, and I could just go in and say, well, this should have been 6,500. It's already posted, it's already saved, but I can just change it that easy. So that's putting in the budgets in both systems. And I'm going to go back to the home screen now and close this up. So the next thing we'll take a look at is setting up project contracts, or more specifically, progress billing schedule values for like a G703, that type of setup. What we'll do first is we'll go into Sage 300 and kind of show you how those would need to be set up. And then we'll show you some neat tools that you can use in Sage Intacct that aren't available in 300 to do that. So to get a contract into Sage 300 CRE, you need to go into the contracts module. So let's go and open up that contracts module. Okay, now once that's open, basically there's no way to import in schedule values or contract line items in Sage 300. So they need to be entered in manually. Now, there is pre-filling down, so after you get the first item in, you're able to bring the information down from that first item to the second item, but it can get tedious depending how many contract items you have that you need to set up. I mean, some contracts are hundreds of line items, and that can take some time to set up. So you do have the ability, if I go into contracts, I'll go to new contract. I do have the ability to base a live contract off a template. So if your contracts are somewhat repetition as far as what line items you use, you could set up some template contracts and bring them in and then modify the items from there. That's about as close as you're going to get to importing in contract items. So in this case, this contract's unique. We don't have any templates. I forgot what the number was on this contract, but let's call it 23018, I believe. So we'll click OK. And now it comes in. Oh, that's already one I set up. So let's set up another one here. New contract 03019. Okay, so this is a new contract. And you're going to have a header setup area, and then you're going to have the items underneath it. So you're going to work left to right. So again, one of the key things with 300 is learning what fields you actually need to fill in and where they show up on the forms. And it's kind of hit or miss here. It's training and just learning the system. But we'll type in, this is the contract for John's department store. Okay, and I know that I need the description. I know that I need the project location because that's how it pulls up on the progress billing on the AIA. So I would put in the, street number here, city, fill out the address. Okay. I also know that I do not want to approve this yet because you don't want to approve to the very end. So there's some certain rules and formatting that you need to follow when setting these up. But I'm just going to work down the next tab here. And this is where you would come in and say what type of worksheet view. So when you're entering in your progress billing for that month, what view do you want to use? And typically people use what's called the progress billing view. So you need to fill that out. You'll also notice here you can distribute to, just like on that AIA form. State of, county of, those show up on the form. So it's a matter of knowing which field you need to fill out in which area. Okay. Invoice. How do I want to invoice this contract? Well, I want to invoice it by the contract, meaning application 1, application 2. I want this based on the contract. So some people will put draw in here. Some people will just put APP, whatever you want that abbreviation to be. But again, it's knowing what field you need. Do I need the checklist information? Do I need references? Do I need text field? I do know that contract 4 fills out in the top of the progress billing, the AIA. So it's like there's a lot of hit or miss in training. And then what prefix is this for? What company? Things like that. So I'm going to set up my header information, and then I usually say to get back to the general tab. And then what I would do is set up my schedule values, and this becomes the part that is manual in Sage 300. So just to jump over why we have this open, where I would do that header information over in Intacct. Again, I'm over on the right side, projects, and I'm going to be in project contracts. So I can hit the plus button and start a new project contract. So we're kind of in that same area here. So the system wants, and notice we have the asterisks again, it wants to know what the contract ID is going to be, what the contract name is, what the project is, and what the customer is. So it's telling you what fields are required. What I usually recommend is pulling the project first, because that's the one that we know of. Now, again, I have no idea what the number is. I don't even remember it giving it a number. There it is. It gave it a next consecutive number, 241003. I just typed in John's. What's nice about that is that pre-fills in the customer, and now you know what the contract ID should be. Typically, people use the same as the job number for the contract ID. I'm going to do the same here, 103. And project contract name, same thing. They usually use the same as the project name, so I usually just come over to here, copy it, and paste it in. So you can do that. Contract date. So let's say the contract date is 5/30. Oops, sorry about that. And then I have other information that I can fill in. These are for reporting purposes, not required, but you know, hey, do I want to say this is a fixed project? Do I want an architect, you know, linked on there? Okay, and then how am I going to integrate this GL? Just like before, we're going to post this contract amounts over to the general ledger as a budget for the project for the contract side. And now we're going to be able to run our reports, and we'll see that in the next section. So what's really nice here is what I would typically recommend doing is pulling up another contract that's similar to this and duplicating the header. And then it'll fill all this information out. Now, I'm not putting any data in here, just like before, as far as amounts. I'm just getting the header information ready to go ahead and bill it. And then over here in billing details, what's the last billing application number? You know, that's the same that I did over here in 300. So let's just do the same thing. We'll say it's APP0000. Okay, we'll do that. So I would click Save in Sage Intacct, and that's going to add my project contract header. I can sort by the number now, so I can put that first one up at top. There it is. Notice I don't have any amounts in yet. Okay. Now back in 300, to get the individual items in, what I'm going to have to do is either use Edit, Add Contract Item, or I can hit this little button here, Add New Contract Items. And what's critical is that you get the first line item correct. So let's say it's 01. You can call your IDs anything you want. I click OK. And now it drops down to the description here. And then you call whatever you need your line item to be called. General, let's just say general conditions. And notice what you have to do here. I have to pick the customer. So over in Intacct, you'll remember I did that already at the header level. Well, in 300, you do it at the line level. So here I would say grocers. Oh, it doesn't pre-fill. So I have to click my list and type in Grocers Association. And I don't necessarily need a date here because as long as you have a date on the contract, oops, sorry, it's going to yell at me here. I'm going to fill that out and come back to it later. As long as you have a date on the contract, that's what's going to use. But notice I also have to link it to the job because in 300, I didn't say that yet. I just gave it a similar job number, but I still didn't link it. So you do it in Intacct at the header level, so you get all that information out of the way one time. It's a little less confusing as far as the workflow. So I'm going to link it to my new project that we set up earlier, John's. Okay, and again, I'm not going to approve this. I'm going to do it at the very end. I don't want to approve this yet. And then I'm going to go to the billing tab. So this again is what information do I need in the system? So it's a progress billing type. Can do T&M here as well, but we're going to do progress billing for the example today. I also have to tell it what form do I want to use. So here's the AIA form. This progress billing form generates the lines and everything. So let's use this progress billing form. But you got to know all that each contract. We don't have to know that there. We can set that up behind the scenes ahead of time so we don't have to pick that every time. Do I want retainage on this line specifically? So let's say, yep, I want 10%. Okay, do I need to fill out anything else? Not sure, but we'll keep moving on. Contract. So here's where you put your amount for general conditions. It's very confusing here. You can fill it out in these amount types. Ultimately though, what really matters is that they're in this total for this line. So we can say 75,000 for that line. So general conditions, 75,000, and it's going to keep adding here. Now there's other things you can do, but those are the main 3 tabs. You know, you can fill out references, text field, tax information. It made me fill out tax information here. It's non-taxable and it's got a tax group. But really it's just these first 3 are the most important ones. And what needs to happen now is once you get through that first line, then you'll click add new contract item again. And notice what it says. Item will be based on item 1. So that is nice in 300 where it will pre-fill down for you. So you don't have to fill the same information out again. So it helps a little bit, but it also can get you into trouble because if I say let's create item number 2. So it pre-filled in the customer, the job, the retainage, the form, not the amount, the tax filled in, so all that filled in. But if you get something wrong at this first line and you don't realize it until you create all the 100 lines you've already created, to correct it, you have to go into each line individually and make those changes. It's really stressed in training for 300 that you get these contract line items correct on the first line. Number 2, we'll call it site work. And the only thing I have to do really here at this point is give it a description and put in the amount just for site work. Okay. Okay, and then I would continue on the process 03. Okay, and the only reason I'm doing this is to kind of show you what you can do in Intacct that's a little above and beyond this. Concrete, let's just say, and you just keep going as many line items as you need. You know, you just keep cranking them out and you just keep adding to this description. Okay. Then once you're done, you'll approve it. And once you approve it, you want to make sure that you're approving as the contract date. It does pre-fill to today, so be careful. I forgot what I used for contract date, but we'll say it was that one. And now they're approved. And now that'll update your contract amounts in 300. So it's not bad if you have 10, 20 items, but if you have 100, 200 items, it can take some time and you want to be careful. Now, you can do that same type of process in Sage Intacct. I can come into a project. Let's go into John's. We already created our header. And you'll notice I can, from John's, I can click on this lines here. So now I can add my lines for John. The John's department store, notice there's no lines yet. I can click add. I can manually add them just how I did in 300. I would do the same type of information, put the line number, the line name, what type of billing, what's the amount. And then I can duplicate, so I can base line item 2 on line item 1, and I can duplicate down, and I can duplicate down, and I can do that, and I can do that in Intacct. What we're hoping to get you to is be able to, something that a lot of people have asked for and wanted in 300 is the ability to import in your schedule values line items. So instead of doing that, I can come into John's here under project contracts, and you'll notice on top, I can import in project contracts. That's the header. Usually I just say set that up. It's pretty easy to set up. And then I can also import in the project contract lines. So Sage Intacct gives you a template, and it's a flat CSV template Excel that you pull up in Excel. I have one created already. So basically what can happen is you can come into this template here and you can fill in or copy and paste in the actual schedule values that you got from somewhere outside of the system. And then from this template, import them right in. So it's the same type of information we set up in 300 and we filled in. But you can see here, it's a very flat file. They give you an explanation. Is it required? Is it not required? What type of values here? But it's pretty straightforward. ID, name, amount, what the retainage percentage is, what revenue account. So all these things can be defaulted, but you can add as many of these lines as you want right here in Excel. copy and paste in. Once it's done, you save it as what's called a CSV file. I'll save it. And now instantly under project contracts, I can go to import project contracts. I could browse and grab the file. I saved it in my download folder, but you can put it wherever you want. And then obviously you want to name it accordingly, but I named it right here, project contract line item. Bring it in, and now I can import it, and what it will do is it'll give you results to your email. So it'll tell you if it worked, if there was any errors, and why. You're missing a field here. But basically I can do this, I can click import, and it's either going to instantly import it or it's going to tell you why it couldn't import it. So this right here says successfully imported 12 project contract lines. I did that a lot quicker than entering it over in 300. Click done. And if I refresh my browser, now I should see my contract under John's department store has a value in there. So you'll see that value. If I click on lines, I instantly have 12 lines in the system. You can import more. You can also just set up additional from there and go from there. So that's the biggest difference in the contract setups. You do have the capabilities to import them in. And for a lot of people, this is going to just save a lot of data entry and time into the system. At this point, we'll keep moving along here. We're going to go back to the home screens, and next we're going to take a look at some reporting and see some of the differences in the reportings in both systems and some of the features and functionalities inside these reports as far as navigation goes. So I'm going to close the contracts module and get back to the main screen in Sage 300. So the last area we'll take a look at today is the reporting and some of the differences between the 300 reporting and inquiries versus Sage Intacct reporting and dashboards. So basically with Sage 300, let's go into Information Assistant. It's a module that you can see reports from different applications all in one place. Let's take a look at that first. So 300 does a great job of reporting in detail up to summarization levels. Most of the reporting though is one-dimensional, meaning that you can't take it anywhere else. You can't drill down. You can't get to other areas in the software within that report. You basically have to find versions of the reports that take you where you want to go. So, if I go into job cost control, for example, I can pull up the job cost as a specific date report. You do need to know your transaction files. And if you notice here, we talked about this a little earlier. Reports are built based on what area of the software you're in. So we're in job cost. So these are pulling off job cost transaction details, which might not always give you what you need. And then it's also important to know if you're in the history file or current, if that's basically current is posted, or if you just want to look at unposted stuff. So you got to know a little bit more about the data structures in 300. But we're going to say current here. And then from there, you do have some capabilities to range. I only want to print information on one particular project. You can date range it depending on the report. And then you can also add your own conditions. So the conditions are a little more archaic as far as how do you add and build more conditions. You need to learn the software a little bit more. It's not as intuitive. What field do I need to add? So it does take some training. But if I click on add here, now I have access to the whole transaction record, and I can filter on anything in the system. I can say, for example, I just want to see information that came from accounts payable, for example. So there should be an application of origin in there, or I can say equals to AP, and I could just filter transactions that way as well. So you can add these filters on here, but it does take learning your data a little bit more. Where is the field I need? Do I need to do an and, an or, etc. But in this case, if I just want to print preview, I can hit a print preview. And, the report, let's find a project. So the food warehouse, for example, in 300, this is actually providing us with information that we need by cost code category. This is showing us total estimate, total committed, total cost, that type of thing. But I can't drill down. I can't take this anywhere else in the system. What else I can't do is I can't bring this report to Excel very easily. One of the things in 300 is getting existing reports to convert over to Excel doesn't always work smoothly. It'll put in extra columns, extra rows, so you have to find yourself reformatting that information once it gets into Excel. With Intacct, first and foremost, the converting to Excel is incredible. The best I've seen, where basically any report, any format is going to come over to Excel in a functional way that you're going to be able to use that information. Let's take a look at a report. I believe I have it in the projects menu. Yeah, the cost overview report. Let's take a look at that. This report, I believe, is similar to the one on the left. And let's get this generated for you. So this is going to generate. Now, there is no conditioning built into this, any filtering built into this report, but there could be. This report, what's nice about this one is this report does the filtering at the job level. So I can come into here and I can flip it right on the screen. It's interactive. I can flip it where here I have to hit next to get to the next job. But if I want to look at transactions for Kansas City, now I can see here's my different categories. There's my costs. And this report doesn't happen to do it, but there is reports where you can actually drill down, and we'll show you some of these and see the data now from there, and that's part of the power. But I can easily, from Intacct, take this report, I can process and store it, I can memorize it, and what that means is I can schedule this report out to run automatically. So maybe I want to send this job cost report out to a project manager team or an ownership team. Within Intacct, you have the ability to schedule this report to run and email out in a PDF fashion or Excel fashion, whatever you want, automatically once a week. So these users don't even have to be in Intacct. They can get the report sent to them. Can't really do that in 300 unless you have the My Assistant program on top of that, where you can schedule some of those crystal reports to run and be sent out automatically. One of the other things is you can add any of these reports to the dashboard instantly, and we'll take a look at dashboards in Intacct, where you can actually have a project overview dashboard and things like that. Can't really do that with these reports. In 300, they are what they are. Now they can be modified with Report Designer or with Crystal Reports, but they're not multi-dimension, so to speak. You do have inquiries in 300. Inquiries are going to be your best bet to get information to Excel. So for example, if I take a look at a cost spreadsheet inquiry over in 300, I'm going to pick my current file. So you will notice that, you do have a job report here, and I can send this report to Excel if I want to. And I do have some drill down capabilities here. So I can come on this project here and say, let's look at, for the food warehouse, let's look at the material line item only. And now when I drill down, it takes me to another inquiry where I can see material costs versus material budgets. And in some cases, you can keep going. This one you can. This one now takes us to the accounts payable invoice as well. And then if I paid it, but you notice I can never get back to the invoice record or document record itself. Okay, but I can drill down to the data, but it only takes me as far as that job cost transaction is going to take me. And then if I did want to send this to Excel, I would hit this Excel button here, export to Excel. Problem there is it doesn't bring any totals over. If you want to see grand totals, it doesn't bring any totals over, but it's good for inquiring and doing some troubleshooting and like for general ledger data. So over here in Intacct, one good report to take a look at is over in the financial reporting. Because we are dimension driven, we can run all of our project reporting, all of our job cost reporting, our WIP reporting, all of that, all from one area. And that can be the financial report. So you'll notice here, I have your traditional financial statements, balance sheet reports. I can see profit or loss by department, by location, by detail, by customer, which are some pretty powerful tools here. But what I can also do is, and let me close this screen here. What I can also do is, if you'll notice, there's a project overview report. There's some WIP reports as well. I can see project profitability by project manager, by location, by department. I'm going to take a look at this project overview report here, right here. So I'm going to click the HTML view. And when I'm in here now, there is some filters. I can condition it, date range it. I can also see it for a particular location. So maybe I just want to see my Kansas City projects or my Timberline General Construction projects. And I can also have what's called dimension groups. So in this case, project groups. So maybe you want to group your projects up by just seeing all my hotel projects, or just want to see all of Greg Lovett's projects for project manager. So you can have these groups be unlimited here as to how you want to break these out. So in this scenario, let's just take a look at the whole Timberline General Construction group, all projects. I'll click OK. And now this is going to generate a report for you at the project level. So now you notice you see some different colors here. So this report is drillable. You're going to be able to drill down into the detail here. You can also get back to your filters from right here in the top right corner here, and it will regenerate the report. You can print from here. You can generate this right to Excel. And I'll show you this real quickly. Once I generate it, downloads the file to Excel. And if I open that up, just to show you the formatting, and how useful it is. Once Excel opens up, we will take a look at that. There it is. And so you can see here, it brought it over. There's no extra columns. There's no extra lines in here. You can actually use this as a functional report for forecasting or whatnot. Okay, so it brings it over really well in the system here. Let me close that up. So if I get back to here now, any of these fields can be drilled down on. These can be turned on and off. So if I want to see, for example, we can see down here, we don't have that one report in there, but if I want to drill down in any one of these fields, so for example, the San Antonio job, if I want to see my cost details, what makes up this $1.6 million cost here, I can click on it, drill down. It's still going to keep me in the main report, but now it opens up the detail report. And it shows me, this happens to be a general ledger drill down. It shows me by general ledger cost of sales labor, all my entries, all of my cost of sales subcontracts, materials, whatever I had here, but I can see quickly, here's all the charges I have on the project for my subcontracts. So for example, George's excavation, there's a $100,000 entry here. Let's take a look at that. Let's drill on that. And now you'll notice now this takes me into an actual document, an actual transaction. This is taking me back to the actual bill in accounts payable. It's taking me back into the actual physical bill itself. If I had an attachment to this, if I have a scanned in document, I can see the actual document here. I don't have one on this, but we can add one just to pretend. Let's see if I have one here. And if I want to look at that, I can see that document here. So you can get at all of this data and drill down to the actual entry screens. And again, this is all based on security, and if you have the right to do so, you can do that right from here and get into the entry screen. Okay, I'm going to hit cancel here. It takes me back to the next report, and now I can drill down to a different area and take a look at this $6,000 entry. So it's very interactive. The reports are going to be extremely interactive. I can see the posting detail here, the full general ledger entry. I could take it to the actual GL entry. I can see the history. It was created by, it was modified. Here's the document number. There's the vendor. You can always drill in detail here when you're in the system. So let's just cancel that. And let's go back to, let's close this out. And now I'm back to my main report. And maybe you want to see your billings now. So maybe I want to see total build. I can click on the Houston project for total build. And now I am drilling down into all of my invoice detail for that project. And you can see there's all my invoices. And if I want to click on that credit line there, basically now it takes me into my invoice, into my billing. If it was a progress billing, you'd see multiple lines here. And I can get to the actual project contract billing right here. And you can drill down. So I think this kind of gives you a really good idea of how multi-layered and navigational this is. You know, it's using state-of-the-art technology. We're able to drill down and be interactive right from within these financial reports. And that goes for your general ledger. I mean, this is something, you know, if you run a report, general ledger report in 300, you know, you can create some decent financial statements. What's lacking is bringing those to Excel and then having those drillable. Well, that's no longer going to be the case. If I want to run a P&L, let's say by percent of revenue, I could run that financial statement off of that. And I could run it for a particular department or just for a particular location. And I can take a look at that statement. And if you notice the speed as to how it comes up as well, this statement actually is summarizing by groups. But you can see here now what's nice is if I want to see all the detail for the revenue for sales group, I can click on that. I can say 10,000 for that group. It might be 3 accounts. In this scenario, it's only 1 account. It's 4,000, but it might be 3. And you can see all the entries. And notice because I clicked on the month end, it's only showing me my entries for June for revenue. So you can see that right here again, 630, 630. If I run and click off the quarter end, now I can see my revenue for all the entries for the quarter. Okay. And then I could drill down into the detail here as well. What's really nice too is you can also expand these, and this depends on the report and how you want to save the defaults. This one, if I click on the drop down, this will also show me my general ledger accounts. I only have names showing here. I don't have GL account numbers showing here, but you could. You can keep drilling down on this design. So very interactive, just takes the whole reporting options to a whole different level here in Intacct. You don't really have dashboards in Sage 300. You do have the ability to do some crystal reports that can kind of act as a dashboard. One, for example, is in project management. If you have this module, there is a what's called job overview report that's pretty handy. It's a crystal report. And you'll just see, this is demo data. It's not really robust as far as how big my demo files are. But you'll still see how it does take some time to come up. Let's just say all jobs. And let's do a print preview here. And so, you know, it's not instant. It's going to generate through. It's going to take some time to get, and it went on my other screen here. So let me try and drag that over for you. So there it is. So this one isn't that drilled. I don't believe you can drill down here. Let's see if we can drill down. Yep. So this one you can drill down a little bit in that, but it has to be built. It has to be built and set up in the crystal design. It's not out of the box. Actually, this one's not drilling down, but there's some dashboards that do drill down in that scenario. And those dashboards can be put on your desktop over here, but the problem is they do take a long time to run, and most people turn them off because of that. Whereas in Intacct, you're going to be living in these dashboards. These dashboards are very easy to set up. The system does come with some out of the box. This project performance one, for example. Once this thing loads up, you can have a particular dashboard to open up. Let's say if you're a project manager and just see your project, you can have it default to just seeing that. You can also flip them around if you want to see different dashboards during your day here. But this is kind of the idea where you want to get to in Sage Intacct is you can have some widgets run, you can have some interactive reports right here on your screen, and you can filter the data real time. So you'll notice here, I can say, you know what? I want to see every project. So I can see all my projects here. So I just applied that filter. And once I do that, this is going to give me a view of all my projects for Timberline Construction. So my project profit margin is 35 mil. You know, now you see a bigger list here. Okay, and these reports are all generating real time as they come up here. Now I might want to say, you know, just show me for a particular location. I just want to see my Kansas City jobs. Or like we did earlier, I just want to see all the projects for Greg. So I only want to see Greg's projects, so I can add that here and I can click apply. And that's going to now just show me Greg's projects and how he's doing as a project manager profitability wise. And you can kind of get an overview from there. So now, just like we drilled down before, I can drill down here as well, the project overview, and do the same thing. But you can also have these other reports based on different dimensions. So you'll notice here, this one shows you your P&L, but the columns are for each job. So here's a P&L for each job across the top. You can't do that in Financial Statement Designers in Sage 300. Here's one by customer. So here's profitability by customer for everything you're doing for this customer right now. Which ones are we more profitable for? Again, this is a runoff of financial data because of the dimensions. You just can't do that in 300. And then here's one by project manager, which we're already on the project manager. But you can see here, these are all interactive. And this is ultimately the ultimate goal where you want to get to with your dashboards. You know, if you want to move them around, I like this overview, I want to move it around. You know, you can do that type of thing. You can add dashboards. You know, and there's some training and some sessions we have on how to do all that in the system. So hopefully that gives you a little flavor into some of the comparisons, especially in the job costing areas of both Sage 300, CRE, Timberline, and Sage Intacct. And please, if you have any questions or comments, please put them below. And please subscribe to our YouTube page, and look forward to talking with everybody soon. Thank you.